we have constitutions that are supposed to ensure basic human rights and the rule of law, but again and again, we see these police institutions not just not upholding these laws, but also just like breaking them all the time and acting in ways that are completely criminal. And so what I'm going to do is just sort of start with some questions for each of the comrades. So the first thing I wanted to ask Gacheke, could you maybe just give us a little bit of background about your own sort of life in Kenya, and how is it that you came to be involved in anti-police violence activism? Thanks.
Okay, great comrade. Greetings, and thank you very much, Chris. And I'm very honored to be in this land of great freedom fighters. My name is Gacheke Gachihi. I come from Nairobi, Kenya. And I have seen in the video Mathare Social Justice Center. But I'm not a guy who was born in an urban town. Kenya is a former British colony. So my grandfather was taken to work as a colonial settlement farm in an area called Rift Valley. That great Rift Valley, these are the places where there was a highland and a farming, like here in South Africa, where there's a lot of white farmers who has land. That's what happening also in Kenya, the colonial settlement. So my grandfather was working there. So I am a third generation of people who are born in those areas. Then, as you know, in this in Africa, we have a big problem after independent ethnic mobilization. Politics are organized around ethnic line. So in 1992, when I was very young, we were evicted in the place that we are staying, because when a British colonial settlement came, it took some ethnic community to other areas to work for them, and that area was for pastoralists. So when the independent came, people were given land, and our current president, his father, grabbed a lot of land. So where we were supposed to be, the land was taken, so nobody would have gone back there. So ethnic mobilization of politics in Kenya still created this tension. So that from there, when I was young, we left there in 1992. And just imagine, when you were young, you are living, you don't know anybody in the urban city, Johannesburg, you come. So I lived in the street for some time. Then after that, I was taken to juvenile home. After that, I was taken by a charitable organization. They took me back to school, and it was very difficult life. It's like the same way place you are. So you go to school, there's no food, so I started doing car washing. In the rural area, there was no interaction with the police. But in urban, because of livelihood, car washing, every time police would come, say it is illegal. Then I was wondering, I'm feeding for myself, I'm struggling. Then the police are saying illegal. Now then they are coming, they want to take some money from us, so that they say there is illegal connection of water. So we were beaten every time. And that's how I was ushered in the struggle against police brutality. And that's my background as a human rights activist. And so from that time, I have continued in the path of the struggle of the human rights. So Kenya is still the same. As you know, in 2007, we had our president taken to ICC because of the same ethnic violence. So we are victim of that background. Nothing has not changed. And that's the background how we have started the Mathare Social Justice Center. In the same area I lived for many years. And I'm very honored to be sharing this experience with you, because it gives me hope that if you unify our struggle, we can achieve more.
Thank you.
I answered your question.
Thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, that was very powerful. Now, Melita, please can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you've been doing as part of Abahlali here in Gauteng?
My name is Melita Ngcobo from Vus'muzi branch in Gauteng. When I started joining the movement, it was 2018. There was a reblocking struggle, and on that reblocking struggle, the houses were being demolished and the yard were being cut into half. If you have 20 by 24, they were cutting your yard into 10 by 12. And then it is where I joined the struggle. There was a tent that was there. I went there, and then when I get there, I listened to the message that was there. It was Abahlali baseMjondolo, and then they talked about that reblocking. Surprisingly, I was chose to be, I was a treasurer on that time. I was being chosen to be in a committee on that time. And then what makes me join Abahlali, it was a fear of losing my home. It was a fear of my home being demolished. I think my house was 2 months old. I have built it from, firstly I stayed in the shack for 19 years. Then after that, I was working at school. I collected money, and then I built my 3-room house. After that, they wanted to demolish. On the other section, they were doing reblocking. Even today, my house is still on the threat to be demolished. What is Abahlali baseMjondolo? Abahlali baseMjondolo, it's a movement. It's a movement that started in 2015. It started in 2005 in Kennedy Road. That is where I knew that, okay, this movement can protect my right.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I mean, just something I noticed, both of you discussing about your life experience, there's, you really see how, the police and other state officials, intervene in this way that's very sadistic and cruel, whether it's, assaulting people for trying to feed themselves or, destroying someone's house. And then you see that, but then there's this huge sort of, you can contrast that with the way police deal with very serious things like organized crime, political corruption, like these things which actually are very, very serious criminal threats and really do undermine the social fabric. And it's just like, it's very disturbing to see how that's such a common theme. Yeah. So, but one of the things we're going to talk about today, I think, is, not accepting this kind of state of affairs and finding out ways to sort of resist and push back against this. And so on that subject, I'd like to ask you, just now we're going to go across here to see the photo exhibition, which is called As We Lose Our Fear. So I wanted to just ask if you could maybe just give us some background into what the exhibition is about, and what are the sort of things we like, what are you how is it like a way to sort of humanize people who've been victims of police brutality, but actually show them as human beings whose lives were important, not just statistics.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris, and that's very powerful. When you talk about what's happened when people are looting the country, corruption, drug baron that are in ministers of government, they are not arrested, and they are the one who make poor people live in the condition that you are. It's horrible that the police used that way. The reason why we have done the exhibition, and especially the women faces, you see majority of women faces, is that in Kenya, when a young person is killed, it is normalized. Police may say, as you saw in the video, 3 gangsters were shot dead, they were robbing people or they were snatching phones, and that is the end. And it's very easily, you can be found yourself there as an innocent person, but even you saw the video, majority of the young people, they are condemned even before they are head. So why we did that, I did some work with the human rights organization, and I used to take the names of torture and victims to those organizations coming from Mathare. And every time when they go to Geneva, they go to international human rights, they just show the list of the people killed. And nothing would happen. They just say that 40 people killed. The independent police, they do that. So it was normalized, and people knew that you can be killed anytime and nothing will happen. So we started Mathare Social Justice 2015. The reason even me I was fearing, because you're doing community work, but if as it happened even in Abahlali, that you can conspire with the criminal police and they kill you, and they say, okay, he was just also part of criminal gang, and you're a community organizer. So for me, first of all, it was an interest to make sure that if you continue doing human rights work, community organizing, and extrajudicial killing continue, also it can be used as a targeted to people who work in social justice. So in 2015, we started with saying that stop normalization of extrajudicial killing, and then we had to change, not the way NGO are doing, because NGO will do statistic, and then they say name, and then they switch there. For us, we change and say we'll put faces of the people. If there is a name, we put your name, and then your age and circumstances and the face, so that it can remain in a memory of the people. So we did that in 2015, and then we documented a whole Mathare. We had a lot of young people were killed in a country where almost 1 year we could count 800 young people killed, both in the newspaper and what we are collecting in Mathare. So we put the names and faces. Then it sparked some conversation. The international media contacted us, the local media contacted us, and then there was a headline of saying police execution of young people. So they started picking from us. So the reason we did that is to humanize people. To humanize, they are not just numbers. Then after that, so to reach to this exhibition of the women, many times it has been happening in Kenya. When young people are killed, people do the burial. Sometimes even the police deny you the burial. So we decided to do the women to bring them, because also we told them we cannot defending for you forever. You have to come out and stop being victim and start becoming human rights defenders. So we invited them to come to our center, and then we trained them about documentation, the same way we are doing, name, circumstances of killing, the photo of the victims, and also we share the narrative of the family so that it can remain in their memory and in the memory of that community. When you meet that photo, you remember this person was with us, because what the state would want to is us to forget the cleansing of young people. So we invited the women in our center, and we started discussing how can they form a network. And we were inspired by the struggle also that has happened in Latin America, where there was a lot of extrajudicial killing, people enforced disappearance, and the state would always want us to forget. So we invited the women, and they formed a network of mothers of victims and survivors network. Then from there, we asked them that if possible, we can document their story and the story of their sons, so that we can keep this as a memory and use it for mobilization. But also the key is to make sure that we humanize them. Because every time when you are killed in Joburg, they say 5 youth were killed, 10, you're just statistic. But when you put the name, the community will never forget about you. So we did that exhibition, but one, it was to take exhibition to the middle class areas, because middle class, they don't know, they only see the headline about youth killed. So we say we'll take this exhibition in the middle class area, like in a good suburb, and we have a room like this one. Then we put the photo around, and then we say in the gates the middle class can come, but they pay a small fee, and we sell them some books, some things, t-shirt. But we explain to them this is what happening in Mathare, because rarely do they come to Mathare. I'm sure even in your area, you will not find middle class many coming there unless they are coming for what you call slum tourism or informal settlement tourism, seeing there. So they don't. So we took it there, and that was our reason to create awareness that there is a major crisis that is happening in Nairobi, informal settlement, where young people are being killed every day. Now it is not me. So we put the photo of the women and the story behind of their son. And not very many young women are found as a part of the victim of extrajudicial killing, although there are some few. So we put this as a way of creating awareness, and also part of building the movement and continuing recruiting more people, especially those people who are affected. because many times when the youth are killed, the family does not want, because always the police will criminalize you. That's why the Amani Bana saying stop criminalization of poverty, stop criminalizing youth, because always police will create a propaganda and say this family is harboring the criminal. That's why we are treating them there. They deny the burial. So it's part of removing that fear and taking this story to the public, and especially to the middle class, who can come and see what is happening. And then we did it before the that was last year. We did it. Was last year. We did it to make sure that the people can come and see, and also we allowed them to make sure that they can tell this story to other networks within that area. And also it was a part of also doing this as a part of fundraising and writing book about Mathare Social Justice Center and our struggle for social justice and a human right. I think there is a photo that we'll see around there, and it's part of also movement building. Because if I didn't do that, I'm sure I will not be able even to connect with you in a better way and articulating the issues of human rights violation in Kenya and the way poor people are treated. So I think, Chris, that's the background of the exhibition. And also the women, we as we did the first march in 2018, we invited them in the start, and you saw in the we invited them to name their sons by name. And from there we form the network. And we see also women in Kenya also is very important, because if the youth who are marching on the front, sometimes the police will come shooting. But if they see there's a women and kids in the front, sometimes holding hands together, sometimes the women have I don't know whether it's although here in South Africa, sometimes police see women, they think, okay, these are not very for you they shoot first, but for women first of all they can march, because they think women are not violent. So also is a way of bringing more women, more youth women in the movement, so that at least you can continue fighting against police extrajudicial killings.
Oh, thanks so much. That's really interesting. I mean, something as you're talking about, and this is also something that's very pervasive in South Africa, is, you know, how entire groups of people, so all poor people and young people especially, are often completely criminalized by the police. And that's actually, like, the police are actually literally trained to think that. So, like, the entire way that the police as an organization, they are trained to view most people as potential enemies. And that also is like a big sort of driver of violence, because, like, the way police are trained, for example, is, so if, you know, like, if a cop, for example, pulls you over, or you're interacting with a police officer, if you ask them a question, the way that they're trained is they interpret that as, you know, you are undermining them or challenging their authority. And it's very dangerous, because, and as you said as well, like, it's got so normalized, especially in South Africa here, because what'll happen is, you know, the media will often report on people who've died, but you know, they don't actually talk about them as people. They don't talk about who they were, the circumstances leading up to it, and that is deliberately done to sort of normalize it and to make it seem that, you know, if killings are happening in a shack settlement or in a township, that's, you know, that's normal, that's fine, something that just happens. And so like, to move on from that as well, so, you know, talking about this idea of human rights defenders, so Abahlali has been one of the very key organizations that has been, you know, defending basic rights in South Africa, but at the same time, you know, it's faced a lot of intense police violence, you know, such as the killing of activists and harassment, you know, false imprisonment and things like that. And I was wondering if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about, you know, your sort of experiences with the police as an activist. Yeah, so if you can maybe talk on that a bit, thanks.
Okay, in 2019, it was early, I think it was February, it was January. When the reblocking started, there was 11 women who were marching against reblocking, and then we march. We did our march. Around 12 o'clock, there was police. There was 70 vans around us, and there were police all over Johannesburg. There were police from Springs. There were police everywhere, and there were metro police there. And then they came and they told them that we are making noise. Then we wondered, because it was not a suburb. It was a shake area where the noise is allowed. There was a noise unit. There was metro police. There were police. There were CPFs there. Every type of police was there, and then we didn't feel afraid. We talked with them. We talked with the councillor. That was the first day when the march started. The march to stop red blocking. Okay, it went on. Around 2019, after we went to High Court, then I was arrested. When I was arrested, I was from work. I was being called during lunchtime, because where I was working, it was near. I came, and then I found Abahlali and the member of community. There was the people who were working from the toilet. There was the people who were working to install electricity. There were backyard dwellers, and then there were people who were recruited to come and fight with us. There was not the community of that place, but they lied, because they said they were the community of that place. And then when I came, the question that we asked on that time is that yesterday you demolished the shack of her brother, and then today you are demolishing her shack, and the shack was fully furnished. There was a furniture. The furniture was for, I think, his brother have 3 room, she have 3 room, and the furniture was full. They didn't even have a place to sleep yesterday, and then now they are going to demolish her shack, and the rain was coming. That was the question that made us stop the reblocking by that time and say, no, you cannot do this. And the other thing, you cannot take her and put her into 10 by 12, because 10 by 12 is little for her. I think his brother have 3 kids and a wife, and her, she have a 22 years old son. And then they said I was violent. The community started throwing stones. We don't call it community, we call them Ngcobo, the people that have been recruited by the councillor. They started throwing stones. I was injured. Then after the police came, we called the police, and then they came. And then when they came, the police, they were trying to intervene. And then I said, we cannot speak here. Let us go to the police station. We went to the police station, not knowing what's going to happen there. When I reached the front desk, we were 3. It was me and 2 other people that were accompanying me, Abahlali. And then when we reached there, we were going to the boardroom to talk about what happened. And then there was a lady on the front desk the old lady, she was opening the case against me, and she said I tried to strangle her. And then they said I've even violated a high court order. That was my high court order, not theirs. That was our Abahlali high court order, not theirs. Okay, when we entered the boardroom, I sat down, and then the station commander came. Boloka is the surname of the station commander. He came and stand next to me and said, you fought with me the other day. And it was not me, because on the other day I didn't go to the police station. And he said, you must be arrested. You deserve to be arrested. And that is the way I was arrested. They took me and put me in a small room. That small room, it has blood on the wall.
Oh my God.
And yeah. But I didn't stay there for long. Then after that, they moved me to the other office. And the police officer kept on saying, I don't want to arrest you, but I don't have a choice. He even wrote my docket that I was injured, but I was not being taken to the hospital. Then they arrested me. They took me with 2 guys. The funny thing, they mix us with criminals. When they took you to the police station, you go with the people who are really criminals. It means you are a criminal too. And then when I enter the rubber suit where I was being taken to, they didn't even do anything. They didn't book me. They just put me in jail. Then when they put me in jail, there was those police who keep on saying, you beat that old lady, you are a criminal. They have those foul language. They abuse you. They call you names and they ask you, where is your community now? You are trying to be a hero and you cannot be a hero. And the other thing that is keep on coming, you cannot fight the municipality. And my question is, who is the municipality? It's us, the community. We are the municipality and they are our workers, but they don't act like one. Okay, I stayed for 3 days, and then I stayed for 2 days. It was three nights and 2 days. Then I went to court, and that was the difficult day of my life. When you go to court, there is that tunnel. You are from the outside cell, and then there is the tunnel that you move when you go to court, and then there is that small room. And then there was a lady who was brought in. She was from Sun City, and then the lady talked about the life in Sun City, and you understand now it can happen that I'm going to Sun City. Wow, that is difficult there. And then she talks about you have to have money in prison. You have to buy everything. You have to buy your way out. Otherwise, you will be killed in prison. And that made me feel scared. And not knowing that outside there are Abahlali outside there. Then after that, we stayed. And then we appeared into court. And then when I appeared in court, to only find out that there was Abahlali, and to only find out that that was just a abuse. They called it one. It was abuse, and I was supposed to be given police bail on the same day, but they didn't give me police bail. They took me to jail, and then I came out. When I came out, I to only find out that our councillor is celebrating, and he was been celebrating for 3 days that I was arrested. He brought catering on the first day, and then the second day he bought meat for the whole community of Mangosuthu, the community of 300 and something. That they were celebrating my arrest. Then when I come back, unfortunately, at least that I had the strength to come back and go back to the struggle. And then they called again. They called the station commander, and when they called the station commander came to find me on the struggle, and he said, I will just deal with it. I don't want to deal with it again. And then he went away. But the nightmare begins when you go to court. It was during COVID-19 where you go to court alone. You are solicited to the community. Every time when you wake up in the morning, the thought that you can go to Sunset, remembering that story that the lady told. It is a nightmare there. And then I went to court until 2021. Then to only find out that the old lady will never come to court. The charge were dismissed. That was it. And what's happening to you inside? You become angry, you become upset, you become questioning the government, and you become questioning the police. And then the other story that is painful in South Africa is the same as your story. There is those women who come out to sell something. Maybe they are selling vegetables on the street, and then the Metro Police, they come and took away all their stock. And then That is a nightmare. It's a nightmare in South Africa. It's happening every day. Even here in Joburg, it is happening. Even in Tembisa, it is happening. When you try to sell something, they come, the Metro Police, and they took it. And they are not putting it to the storage. They're just taking it to their home to feed themselves.
Wow. Thank you very much for sharing that, like, very difficult experience. And I also think it shows, the fact that, councillors are disgracing themselves with these celebrations, but also the fact that they are, like, resorting to illegal methods. So, making up criminal charges or, hiring thugs from outside. That, I think, is very important to keep that in mind, because it shows that, when politicians do this, they know what they're doing is wrong. Like, they know that what they're doing is illegal. There's no way you can go and, give money to, like, a criminal to come and intimidate someone and not know that you are, breaking the law. And I think it's so important, especially in this country, because there's become a very sort of, this attitude has become normalized within, municipal structures. They're still acting like it's apartheid and that it's not a democracy. And, so just a person asking a councillor a question that they find uncomfortable is seen as somehow, this is a threat and an attack on them. And I think it's really something that needs to be, like, these kind of stories, they need to be in the media all the time. People need to be talking kind of about them all the time and not treating it as just an isolated incident, because it's clearly not. And so I just wanted to move back to our Kenyan comrades. So we're going up in Africa again. And something I just wanted to bring up was a historical point, because obviously South Africa and Kenya both share, colonial histories. Like, our police forces were designed as part of white supremacist imperialist projects. They were never designed to, protect people from crime or enforce the law, or any of these things they're supposed to do. And there's also a very direct connection, because the South African police service and Kenyan police are both, obviously, things change over many years, but their original structures came from British imperial forces. And it's very interesting, because the British police, the two biggest kind of influences on the police as we know them now, the guys in blue uniform who are kind of going around, that starts in Britain in the early 19th century. And the thing is, the police weren't created there, to protect people from crime. They were created to, because Ireland was, like, the first British colony, and so the police were originally created to repress political resistance in Ireland, and also to sort of control people in kind of working class slums in the UK itself. And then that model was exported here. And so what I wanted to ask was a little bit, if you can maybe just say a few words about, Kenya, and sort of how British colonialism and, the sort of violence that was used against the Mau Mau and things like that, like, how has that continued to impact the police today in Kenya?
Very powerful, Chris. That's very powerful, because if we don't go to the roots of the police violence and state violence, we'll never know. Will be like bandage firefighting. And you can see that, as comrades shared, very powerful about how police is used to intimidate you. The prison is when you go to prison, you start fear, and that's the instilling fear. They terrify you. So you see the model, as they say, the way it is a prison, the courts, the police stations, the wall is blood. So this is created to make sure that ordinary people will never resist the state violence machine. And if you try the way you have tried, always you pay a very heavy price and a lot of sacrifice. And as Chris, you have shared, so historical that this model of the policing of it came from British imperialism, the colonial settlement that came to Africa, and it's linked. Both South Africa, Kenya is majority of former British colony. And you see the way they came to Kenya, they came to grab land, and they came, so they had to impose taxation to people, forced labor from 1900. Then from there they declared Kenya as a colony. Then from that time, the native law were created, people were displaced from their homes. So the police was used as an instrument of violence to control people. Until then there was resistance, and then and this is very powerful for South Africa to know, because the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, Mau Mau, inspired even South Africa. If you remember, I don't know who remember, I know Mandela is a controversial sometimes figure here because of the history of land. But when he came to Kenya in 1990, that time the leader of Mau Mau was killed in 1952 after emergency, and the British organized their army. They put down the resistance of Kenya Land and Freedom Army, which is called Mau Mau. And then they compromised with Jomo Kenyatta, whose son is the president today. Then he agreed that he'll leave the land with them, but then they can get the independent of flag and the privileges that they are enjoying as African elite. So they made sure that the leader of the Mau Mau was killed. But that inspiration of land resistance, they used a lot of force. They moved, especially ethnic community called Kikuyu, which is a bit of a dominant ethnic. They were removed from their homes and taken to the concentration camp, detained for many years, like 15 years, until they were able to quell on the Mau Mau resistance. So the force that we used, the torture, the detention, those were the instrument that were inherited by the new government. But I wanted you to bring closer, because this is very important, because you know how linked this struggle is. When Mandela came to Kenya in 1990, first of all, he asked to see the leader of Mau Mau, not the leader, the wife of the Dedan Kimathi. And you know, he asked the president, the dictator Moi, he was very surprised that that question can be asked. But that woman, peasant woman, was forgotten 40 years ago after independence. So they had to say, the woman died and Kimathi died. Even Kimathi, the leader of Mau Mau, we don't know even his grave. He was hanged and buried in a Kamiti maximum prison, the same colonial prison that was built by the colonial system. And the new regime has never even thought about that. So I'm linking this to show that the inspiration of the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. But you see, the neo-colonial state that was left, it borrowed all those tactics of detention, of brutality, of extrajudicial killing, of assassination. And that's the character of a Kenya police state. The economy itself, even you look itself, the economy is the same. Ordinary people are struggling as a peasant, as a hawker in the Nairobi city. They are being brutalized every day, and now they are moved to a level of extrajudicial killing. So I think, and Chris, you have really shared the powerfully, that the model is the same. The model that was used by the British to repress the Irish peoples, control them, occupy them in South Africa, in Kenya, has continued even today. And the same economy, capitalist economy, that is controlled by the elite and our ruling elite. So anytime ordinary people come together, whether it's Shakduela, baseMjondolo, the elite, the councillor, they fear. And that's why even Kenya, they fear. In fact, us, why we are fighting police brutality, is we know is that this is not the end goal. It's part of this to say that we want to organize, but you can't organize anytime every time you are arrested, anytime you speak, you put in. And when you are put in, you go to the police station, first of all, you see the police station is smelling blood. You see? So and this, it go back to the history of imperialism, the way they came, the way they use violence, and it has not changed. And I can tell you, this solidarity is very inspiring, because I remember even when Marikana happened, for us, we organized a small protest in Kenya. But Kenyan were asking, why are you doing that? But we know that the tactics of regime here, the tactic that was used against the Irish people, the tactics that Kenya is using is copied by this police service. They meet now they discuss and they see how do you continue controlling the people. I hope, Chris, I have been able to articulate the question.
Thanks, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. And so going back to South Africa now, something I was just thinking about now when we were discussing something, I feel, I don't know if everyone else will agree with this, but I feel that there's this really huge, huge contradiction in South Africa, because organizations like Abahlali, which are democratic, always are like non-violent. They, you always try work within the bounds of the law. You're not sort of going and disrupting society. Are often treated with, incredible violence, these kind of like humiliating tactics. But then at the same time, we see the government, we have the rise now of xenophobic organizations like Operation Dudala. And so a couple weeks ago, they did one of their operations in Soweto. And, it's people with military uniforms kind of going door to door, accusing people of crimes. And so like a lot of these kind of xenophobic and vigilante groups now are acting in ways that are also like very criminal. But what you often see is that instead of clamping down on them, the police, and I feel that the police, and another thing I think I should have mentioned, but it's also really important to remember, the police don't exist independently. It's because, municipal councillors are giving them instructions that, they do repress people. So, but you often see with the police and the government will often treat these kind of organizations in ways that actually encourages them, because, they won't, and I think it's because the government itself is trying to use xenophobic sentiments as a way of detracting from all their huge political and economic problems. And I just wondered if you might be able to like share your thoughts on why do you think it is that the South African state, what's supposed to be a democratic state, treats popular organizations and grassroots mobilizations as a threat and sees it as its enemy? Like what do you think is the reasons for that?
It is because, yes, they were fighting apartheid, but they didn't fight apartheid for us. They were fighting apartheid to become them. It means they wanted to.
Wow.
It means they wanted to own something. That is why they didn't know that they didn't reach the fact that we were supposed to be having our land back. Now they are protecting lies, because at first, in 1994, they lied to us. They told us that we are going to get our land back. They lied to us. They told us that we are free, and that was a lie, that they were doing it for the rich only. Now they can see that if there is the organization like Abahlali baseMjondolo, the organization is telling the truth, and it goes deep into the real problems of the informal settlement, the real problem of the backyard dwellers, the real problem of a street vendor. Then they know that one day we are going to unite, and one day we are going to bring a change. That is why they are lying. They are feeling that is why they want to destroy the movement so that they can protect their lie. They can protect their capitalism moves, because of if we are there, we are disturbing them.
Wow, thank you so much. Such a powerful way of putting it. And I think it's also so important, as you say, for us to remember that, because I think, governments and the very rich, they want people to be isolated and alienated from each other, and not trying to work together to do changes that'll benefit everyone. And I think that's like a very important part of this police repression, is not just the physical violence, but the emotional and like the violence it does on your mind, like, because they want to break people down, because they don't want people to know how powerful they can be when they organize. And just to just to go back, something I wanted to ask as well, and we sort of discussed this a little bit before, but something I was very interested, could you maybe just break down for us, how do you see, the sort of criminalization of poverty in Kenya? How would you say that's linked to a wider crisis of, things like lack of housing, lack of jobs, and things which are all rooted in, I would say, a wider kind of global crisis of capitalism? How do you see the links between these two things?
Well, very powerful, and I agree with the comrade Melita, is that the fear of the system is when ordinary people start organizing. And that's why even in Nairobi, the police stations are not in the suburb. They are all over around the informal settlement. Like Mathare, it's surrounded by 4 police stations. Now, one exit, there is a barracks of army. So, anytime you want to organize, it is there. So, it's a way of instilling fear permanently. And even when they go to police in those suburbs, they don't go the way they come to our areas. So in your question is very critical, that criminalization of poverty and the way the state organize is to make sure that people don't organize, because if you don't have a house, if you don't have water, if your kids are not getting education, there is unemployment, like this crisis of COVID-19 has left millions of people jobless. There is crisis, people are organizing, they are saying, okay, if the government are there to provide with the basics, and they are not there to provide, and as you say, they are protecting themselves. So this neo-colonial state government are used to control us. And then this is part of the capitalist after colonial settlement, and then after that they said we have independent. We don't have independent because we don't control our land and everything. But I say, as Lenin said, that capitalism, if it cannot resolve its contradiction, like now, American empire is in a crisis. You see, the entire Europe also has been a major crisis. So you see, now when they came to Kenya, we are 7 million that time. Now we are almost 50 million. In South Africa, when they were here, not very many people were educated, were in a university. Now there are millions and millions of thousands of young people with a degree, with the technology idea and everything, and then they cannot provide them with job. We have a major power like China and emerging. So capitalism is having its crisis now, and the only thing that they can do now is to use police state to criminalize us. And I think that's why we needed to broaden our view on issue of police and police violence and criminal violence as a way of dividing us and as a way of instilling fear. So we should see a broader picture of the police brutality, violence, intimidation as a capitalist state trying to suppress us and denying us to organize. And I think that's how I see, and that's why even as we try to move away from naming ourselves as a human rights center, because human rights theory is very limiting. When you're talking about human rights, yes, those forces also, they say they have a right to property, they have a right to what, all that. So we say we have to move a bit and start framing our struggle as a social justice. But we knew at the end of the day is try to articulate the vision of future, saying that people have a right to land, to water, to healthcare, to education. That's where we are moving. But because of the state is very brutal, and the moment you start emerging like Melita and you are now articulating broader issues, now you're not even talking about rights to organize. Now already the officer commanding the station, no, I don't want to deal with you. Now you stop. Now they realize, you start now asking the harder question. Now you can organize people. You can educate them. Now it's no longer one comrade. Now they are 4, they are 5. And that spark a powerful movement that start emerging. And that's why they're also limiting us not to meet. Because when we meet with mothers and women and youth who are organized like you, then they feel like, okay, this movement can shape up and shake the world. And I think that's what we need to think about. But this is a crisis of capitalism. And as movements are emerging, they need to see that broader question. If you don't see that broader question, then you will also be addressing piecemeal issues. And it's not an issue of that when you are arrested is about the hero. First of all, it's a part of sparking that right to organize. When you get it, then other people will come, because many people fear. So I think this crisis of capitalism, it has come up with its violence. And I have said that quote of Lenin: when capitalism cannot resolve its contradiction, where we are in the highest stage of imperialism, what happened is fascism. And fascism is what happening now in South Africa, in Kenya. That now they realize that because they can't solve this problem, they'll say the problem is not even us. The problem is Zimbabwean who are here. Yeah? Tomorrow they'll say, no, the problem is not us who are in power. The problem is this minority. The problem is this. So that division will continue. Because the level we are now, after those neoliberal reforms, we are in a major crisis. Now this crisis, unless we have a very strong social movement, social justice movement that are linked up, progressive political party to come and create an alternative. What might happen is what happened in Europe, that they didn't have an alternative. So who emerged in that time? Hitler emerged, and people thought that he had their hope. Benito Mussolini emerged after that First World War, I'm sure. And that's the crisis of capitalism that time. And many people paid a very heavy price, those who are progressive. And I think that's where we are as a world. If we are not careful, this crisis of South Africa will move to Kenya to Uganda, to Ethiopia, and then you will find these forces engaging us in a very fascist war. And what will happen is millions of people will lose their life.
So yeah, thank you so much. That's such an important point, because I think it really is, like, even 5 or 6 years ago, if someone had told me in the early 2020s there's going to be like a huge pandemic, millions of people are going to be out of work, and there's going to be like sort of fascist type movements all over the place, I'd be like, oh, that's a little bit, it would seem like, oh my gosh, but it's really a reminder of what a serious time of crisis we're in now. And I think one of the very important things is about, like, resisting police violence. It's not just about today, it's also about the future, because one of the defining features of kind of fascistic type political regimes is this belief that the police and the military and powerful people should be allowed to do whatever they want. And it's the sort of law of the jungle, basically. It's this idea of might makes right, like whoever has power can do whatever they want. And it's the complete antithesis of democracy and social justice and just basic humanity, or even Ubuntu, as people might say in South Africa. And so I just would like to ask a question for both of you, and maybe you can both just kind of give some comments on it. So we did run out a little bit of time. Okay. So what I wanted to just ask was, how do you feel going ahead? Because obviously, we want the space as like a sort of a dialogue, as an opportunity to actually have some things kind of manifest out of it. So what I wanted to ask was, both of you, if you could just briefly say, like, what do you feel are some of the ways that people can organize to stand up to police? And I think also we should maybe just call it state violence in general, because it's bigger than the police. Yes. And so what I wanted to ask is, like, maybe what are some of the ways you feel that we can have more sort of organizing around this issue? And I think it's something you've seen, you mentioned Latin America, and it's also something that's happening in the US as well, because there's very strong sort of anti-police violence movements. And I think it's because, in a lot of ways, even though we all live in different countries. At this point, we all kind of living in the same country, which is capitalism, you know, these contradictions. And I also just think something that's very important is, you especially see it in this country, because a lot of, you know, as like poorer people are becoming more impoverished all the time, but also sort of a lot of people in the working and sort of lower middle classes are also very much, you know, like in very precarious kind of positions. And it's so important because, you know, people need to realize that, you know, someone maybe who lives in a suburb still has a common interest and like a shared humanity with someone who's living in an informal settlement. And it's so important to build, you know, solidarity, not people coming in from outside and imposing a certain structure or set of ideas, but having dialogues between people. And so I just wanted to ask if you could both maybe just say what do you think are some of the ways going forward we can build movements to stand up against like state violence in South Africa and Kenya, and also create kind of dialogues, and even more importantly than dialogues, actual you know, structures between, not just in Africa but also with other continents as well. Thank you.
What do we think? Starting with our comrade Yandangile and our comrade Siyabonga Manqele. I think for this year we have to create an awareness that is going to be worldwide. We have to come together in social medias where we can talk about it, and where we can create a place where it can be like a march or a petition that we can make around social media. And then in our different countries, what can we do? We can just make a march at the same day, at the same time, to show that we are tired of being killed, because we are being killed. And what they want us to die silent. They don't want us to tell our story. When you tell your story, maybe 2 days, 3 days later, you are gone, you are dead. That is why what they are doing in Kenya, it is very good, because they make sure that you are not being forgotten. Your story is being told. I think here in South Africa, we can use we can do the same way as the comrade are doing in Kenya, to make sure that they remember our comrade. We can even post it in the police station's wall, so that they can know that you have shot our comrade.
Yeah, that's such a powerful idea.
Yes, it's a powerful idea, and I really like it. And then the other one, it is when our deputy president of Abahlali was arrested, we came together, different movements in Gauteng, and then there was a different movements around Africa and around the world that said you cannot arrest the deputy president of Abahlali, and they released him. I think if we can use that method and make it strong, if there is a problem in Mathare, we have to be there for Mathare. We have to leave whatever we are doing, because we are all poor and we are a majority of the world. If we come together, because earlier I was looking at the different informal settlement in the world, and I realized that we are more than the capitalist, and if we can come together and make a movement that can move at the same time, they will understand that the change will come.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And just the thing you were saying about the police stations just reminded me of just a story I just want to share with. So the Black Panther Party in the US in the late 1960s, they did a lot of, they actually were very successful. I mean, they ended up getting actually kind of crushed by state repression, but they were very successful at challenging police violence within the sort of framework of the law. So some of the things that they would do, for example, would be if police were arresting people, they would make sure to have like a group of people, you know, sort of looking at what they're doing and recording it. And another thing they used to do is they would make wanted posters of police officers who, you know, sort of killer cops, and just shaming them basically, which is like, you should never underestimate how important that is, because I think one thing we can use for our advantage is that at the end of the day, as flawed and as like corrupt and as problematic as like South African government is and the Kenyan governments maybe, they do have to still have some level of popular support, you know, just to win elections and things like that. So I think that's something that can be used very, very powerfully, is pushing the shame, pushing the exposure. And yeah, so maybe if you just want to add some things on that.
Yeah, powerful, Melita, and I agree powerfully that we need to have a joint campaign. I'm so happy that for many years I've been reading about Abahlali, and I read the email, but I never had a contact with the Abahlali comrades. So it was very inspiring when I went to your village then and we met, and now we linking up, we are sharing the same story. So this is very important that we link up, and I think from now on, we can, in memory of Comrade Ayanda, we can start thinking, even naming our campaign in the name of comrades who have been victims of police brutality or the state violence that it's covering with the state. So I think this kind of memorialization of our comrades, that can be very powerful. We have also a lot to learn from South Africa on the way you sing, put that culture of resistance. I think we can also organize joint campaign against police brutality. And you have said that memory that are happening. I remember when Marikana happened, personally I did a march of maybe even look in the Facebook and see, we were not many, like we were 10, but we marched up to South African embassy. Yes. And we sat there, and those guys were looking at us and they were wondering how do. So I think at that time we didn't know contact with any friends, but we were feeling that this kind of killing is what also happening in Kenya every time. So if we were in contact that time, I think it would have been more powerful. You would have amplified our voice, because the Kenya media would not even see that as something important. Even those who came covered, they just see, they don't, because they don't feel like this. There is a way that the suppression of Africa has shown that whenever there is injustice anywhere, people don't build anything. So I support we can have those kind of memorialization. We can agree in the future the dates that we have, and we have a school like a Kruma school. Also, we can request them that they can create a program for teaching people about how to organize a campaign on police brutality, and that kind of if the march is happening, people can amplify that in different spaces. And also you also work with this organization and Comrade Von. I think also writing about the police brutality, writing the stories of comrades who are fighting, amplifying these voices, linking the struggle of police brutality in Kenya and South Africa. That will be very powerful. And Nigeria, like what happened with George Floyd, all over the world people came up. But what's happened in South Africa, comrade is killed, it's always silence, nothing is happening. The same in Nigeria, Nigeria is a former British colony also, the same police, Kenya also, all that. We are not unifying our struggle against police brutality. So I think those we can do, and we can have a Pan-African campaign against police brutality in Africa, and it can shape up. When it's happening here, we can take petition to the South Africa embassy. And those elite in Africa, they share a lot. We shame them, as you say, we shame them. We shame killer cops. We shame them. Those who are doing here, we can shame them in Kenya, and that's the narrative will shape up and become strong. So I think from the way forward, I think, and because we have a social justice center working group in Nairobi that's very strong and strong. We have Abahlali. I think we can start discussing on how we can have a campaign, because I see the death of Ayanda was shared, and I received some information, a photo from some comrade from Kruma School. If we had a campaign, we would have rallied people behind it, and then create a petition. And I think also we should not rely too much also maybe on us social media. We then think also ask, how do we do those marches? Yes, we create awareness, but how do we do those marches as you have said? And also we have to interrogate, write more, write our story, write our reflection. I think also you start writing your reflection, because the new future generation need to know about your struggle. The biggest problem we have also, we don't write you don't write that the way you have shared here, the way I'm sharing. We start writing those reflections because they will inspire other people. Because the state would want us to fear. So when we write those reflections, I write mine, comrade write, then we can put those together, make a small booklet like this one, and a joint one, and then we share with other people. They read the struggle of South Africa, struggle of Kenya, struggle of Nigeria. They become also like a political education material of what we are doing. The story of Yanda is shared because how many young people know about how he was killed? He was a young person. He was killed. He was fighting. We need Kenyans to know about that. We need the other people in East Africa, in Tanzania, to know that. He became a symbol of our resistance. And I think those kind of idea we can work them around. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think just a small thing just to mention as well, because, obviously with like social media and things like smartphones becoming so common, it's created a lot of problems, but it also does have some advantages, because like one of the things I discovered when I was researching my book, for example, is that a very effective way of documenting police violence is people just filming it on their phones. And the thing is, obviously there is like a big risk in that, because the police could grab your phone. But the thing is, nowadays it's you can actually, like, if you're recording something, you can upload it to like a cloud. So even if your phone gets physically taken, that's still accessible information. And I think, like, just thinking about it now, like, just a very practical way, like middle class people could help that would be, for example, to like buy data for people, and just things like that. And just these like small kind of grassroots things are like really effective. And also something I also feel that, like, it's so important to remember how a lot of the time, especially when the police are breaking the law, it's so important to just keep challenging them on that, because the police are not, at the end of the day, they're also human beings. Yes. And you can also like push back against them, and if, like, obviously it's depending on the context, but I feel the more people stand up to this, it's definitely going to create like the state needs to have people push back against it. Like, I had a situation about a year and a half ago, like a friend of mine and I, we got pulled over by like 4 SAPS officers, and they were trying to do a sort of, like, they were trying to get us to bribe them. Mm-hmm. And then they started like threatening us with all this stuff and like saying, like, yeah, we're going to put you in the cells. Mm-hmm. And, so I don't even know where I got the confidence to do this, but my friend and I basically just like, we complained so much and started like basically implying that, we have powerful connections, and it was we were just making it up. And we basically, like, my friend phoned another friend of ours and pretended that he was like a big time lawyer. Yeah. And we started like asking these cops, like, and it was such a bizarre experience I had, because they were just basically trying to intimidate us, get us to give them like a couple 1,000 rand. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we hadn't even like done anything. Like, my friend was a musician, and they took some of his like equipment out, and they were like, "What is this? Are you smoking drugs with this?" And it's like, no, how would you even smoke this? But one thing I noticed that changed the dynamic was this police officer started telling me like, "Oh, what's your name?" And again, I have no idea where this confidence came from. Yeah. But I said, "No, I'm not telling you my name, because I don't have to. It's not against the law." And then they actually started to back off after that. And obviously, look, again, this is I'm not recommending this at all. But I also think like, it just does show that, it's very, very important, because, the states and the powerful people, they want you to feel isolated and terrified and alone. And I think it is just like, in South Africa, and I'm sure in Kenya, it's just so important to just start challenging this, start denormalizing it. And also, at the end of the day, the police are actually paid for by the public, whether through taxes or through the VAT that you're paying. So it's like, they're supposed to work. And I also think a lot of the times, police often are not that well versed in the law. And I think something that I think in South Africa I've seen can help a lot is, especially with social movements, when they can get like sympathetic people in like the legal professions, that's also very, very important, because a lot of the time what police are doing is actually blatantly illegal. Like, you don't need to even change the law to stop them from doing it. You actually just have to enforce it. And that's like a very, very big problem in this country, especially because SAPS, there's a thing called IPID, which is meant to be like, what they're meant to do is, you know, investigate police who are involved in like assault or crime. But what's recently happened is that IPID has basically, they've done this thing where they pretend to have resolved a complaint, but then there's no actual disciplinary action.
Yes.
And something that, but it, again, this pressure thing does work, because in the Western Cape, there's a police officer who had something like 8 or 9 assault charges against him, including like assaulting a teenager. And he ended up actually killing someone during an arrest. And his station commander did this whole thing of saying, oh, you know, can't do anything about it, which is like outrageous. But because there was such Viewfinder, which is a very, very good citizen journalism program, which does a lot of great reporting on police brutality in South Africa, they actually made such a big deal about it that this cop finally got suspended. And I mean, it's outrageous that they were able to get away with so many assault charges in the first place. But I mean, again, this stuff is just like, because I think state power and corrupt power, it flourishes, as you said, like wants people to forget. And it also wants to push everything into like, you know, the sort of shadows and not be open. And it's like, I almost see it as like, you know, a case of just constantly putting light on it, you know, in order to like throw that thing. So yeah, I think, thanks everyone. That was a really fantastic discussion, and thank you so much.